Guys, I'm really delighted to welcome to the podcast our friend Carol Swain. She's got quite a story. She was born into poverty in rural Virginia. She earned 5 degrees. She got tenure at Princeton. She became a full professor at Vanderbilt, where she was a professor of political science and law. And she's the founder and CEO of Carol Swain Enterprises. We also want to talk about her new book, The Adversity of Diversity, How the Supreme Court's Decision to Remove Race from College Admissions Criteria Will Doom Diversity Programs. Carol, welcome. Great to have you. Boy, you and I kind of go pretty far back. I remember first coming across your work on voting rights, and this was in the 1990s, I believe. I was at the American Enterprise Institute at the time, and so we go back really a few decades now, and you have been a close observer and student and scholar of the way in which this whole affirmative action diversity thing started out maybe in a benign way, but quickly spun out of control. Let's talk about the story as it developed from the beginning. Would you say the starting point was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its apparently clear affirmation that race should not play a factor in decision-making? Wasn't that the starting point?
Well, we could go back further, to go back to efforts to desegregate the military, and then the civil rights movement itself started in the 1950s. So I was born in 1954. That was the year of the Brown v. Board of Education school desegregation case. And so civil rights, the movement was taking place, but it always pressed for non-discrimination, equal opportunity. Affirmative action, the first affirmative action executive order was Kennedy, I think in the 1960s. And then Johnson had his executive order. Nixon had his, and it was Richard Nixon, the Republican, that put in place racial quotas. But I can tell you that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when I think about my life and many other Black Americans, that was the high point, because at that time we passed legislation that prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, and religion. And there was a consensus around civil rights. In fact, in the 1960s, we passed 3 major civil rights acts bills. One was the 1964 Civil Rights Act that opened up opportunities for many racial and ethnic minorities as well as women. And then 1965, the Voting Rights Act, 1968, the Open Housing Act. And so we had the right idea in the 1960s, but the turning point, I would say, was Johnson's 1965 Howard University commencement speech, when he said that we were going to, you don't take a shackled runner, put him at the head of a race and say you've been fair, that we would go to the next stage. And that was the preferential treatment and the discrimination really that led to cries of reverse discrimination from white people. And initially we laughed at white people when they talked about reverse discrimination. People are not laughing now because it's so real.
Yeah, it seems like there was a moment early on when affirmative action was defined as outreach. The idea, I guess, was that a lot of people who grew up in poor neighborhoods, maybe even white ethnic neighborhoods, didn't know about how do you get into Swarthmore or Oberlin or Princeton or Vanderbilt. And so colleges need to do a lot more work to widen the pool of applicants. But I think the idea was not that there would be standards that would be adjusted, but rather you would try to get more qualified applicants so that the best guy really would get the job or would get the slot at the selective university. How do you think that affirmative action became such a deeply entrenched system of racial preferences, which seem to have lasted now, 40 years before the recent Supreme Court decision that we want to talk about?
Well, there's even more to it, because the 1964 Civil Rights Act itself led to the advertising of jobs. It ended the old boys and old girls network where someone picked up the phone, they called someone they knew, and they asked them who they knew. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended that. And so outreach came from it. And the initial efforts at diversity, that was where you sent out recruiters to neighborhoods to try to get people to apply for jobs, making them aware of opportunities. And that was how it was initially conceived. That's how it was operating. But I would argue that the riots of the 1960s put pressure on elites. And you may know this sociologist, John D. Scrutiny, UC San Diego. He wrote a book, The Ironies of Affirmative Action. He said it was white male elites in the Nixon administration that pushed for faster results. And that faster results ended up with eventually the really dramatic lowering of standards. And it led us towards where we are today. And where we are today, I would argue, is that affirmative action, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they are intertwined in a way that you can't disentangle them. And affirmative action, it's good intentions. The people it may have helped, right now, it's not helping people. It's lowering standards in a way that's very harmful to racial and ethnic minorities.
Let's take a pause. I'll be right back with Dr. Carol Swain, author of The Adversity of Diversity. Recently, the G20 announced that it welcomed discussion of the effects of implementing central bank digital currencies in their countries. Now, these digital currencies could allow the government to track every purchase you make. They could even allow officials to prohibit you from purchasing certain products or easily freeze or seize part or all of your money. In essence, they give the government control over your finances. Not good. Concerned Americans are diversifying their assets into physical gold with the help of Birch Gold Group. If you want a physical asset held in a tax-sheltered retirement account, you should call Birch Gold. Debbie and I, customers, we buy our gold through Birch Gold. But find out for yourself. Text Dinesh to 989898. They'll send you a free information kit on gold. No obligation, only information. Here's the easiest way to become a Birch Gold customer. If you have an IRA or a 401k from a previous employer, Birch Gold can help you convert it into an IRA in gold, and you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Again, text Dinesh to 989898. Claim your free information kit on gold. Then call Birch Gold, because if digital currency becomes a reality, it'll be nice to have some gold to fall back on.